What in the world are you pounding that poor dog like that for?" "Well, Brother Bevington, he is my main fox dog, and I get money from others in training their dogs by this one. I was to get $5 tonight, but this dog got off on a rabbit trail, and nothing was done." "Well," I said, "does he know the difference?" "Well, most assuredly he does, and that is why I am whipping him so." "Well, will it do him any good?" "Yes, sir, it will be a long time before he will take up on another rabbit trail. Please remember, too, that the elder told me to be sure and stick to the trail. The dog got a terrible whipping for getting off on another trail. So you see, if I failed to stick to it, I would be quartered in a hollow log." I said, "Now, Lord, dost thou want me to take up this trail? Thou knowest the father of that baby, and all that is. Is the case demanding a ferreting out? That wilt thou have me do about it?" Well, I lay there several hours before I could get much light, yet dared not crawl out of my apartment house. "Wouldst thou be getting any glory out of it?" I repeated several times. The trouble was, I had several places awaiting my appearance for a meeting, though no definite dates were set, as I always avoided setting times for a meeting to begin or close. That was always left entirely for the Father to attend to. Many have said, "Well, brother, where are you going when you get through here?" The only answer I could give was, "I don't know." So it took me several hours to dispose of that prospective places, as some of them would be liberal in their offerings, and my pocketbook had been laid on so much that it had been pretty well flattened out, all of which would be used of Satan to keep me from getting to the point of issue. So it took me nearly 19 hours to find out whether God wanted me to take up this trail. After these hours on my face, I was clearly impressed to take up the trail. Well, it was somewhat difficult to get on the trail, to get started right, and to know that I was right. It took me 54 hours to get still and small enough so that God could handle me and get me on the trail. So many of us are so important and so big and so great, so clumsy, so awkward, that it takes God quite a while to get us on the wheel so He can trim us up some, as He has some pretty small places for us to get through. He has to grind off a lot of this importancy, as He can't handle that very well in developing the cases, whatever they may be. I finally got to the place where He could actually pick me up and set me over there on the trail, much to my dissatisfaction, as I could not discover a track, nor even scent the presence of one. But, having received so many thrashings for setting up my ideas, I just got down and soon had the scent and was making good headway. Now, let's go back to what the preacher and the official board said. Be sure and stick to the trail. So I will draw on my imagination somehow, as I have always reserved that right in demonstrating things, and in this case it will help you in getting the case clearly set up in your minds. The four told me to stick to the trail, and I had a right to assume that they meant it. They were on hand to do all they could in getting me to the climax. So now here comes the imaginative help. As they said, "We will be at your back." So as I am on the trail, I want you to see them following me up in the rear. And as the trail goes through some pretty dark places, somewhat difficult to trace out, they call out occasionally, "Ha, Bevington, are you still on that trail?" I answer back, "Yes, still on the trail and making headway, though slow." "Well, stick to it, as we are at your back. We want that thing fretted out." Well, I will not enter into all the details that I faced during the 9 days, but I stuck to it day and night without anything to eat, and had only 2 drinks of water during that time. I would get so close at times that I dare not leave the trail to get a drink, while occasionally they would ring out the words, "Ha, Brother Bevington, are you still on that trail?" Of course, I would assure them that I was. Now on the 9th morning, as I lay there at 3:30, I saw a large church. Now remember, I was on the trail of the father of that babe. Yes, there was a large church with a deep porch in front, and steps going up on said porch from each end, one for the ladies and the other for the gentlemen. There was a door on each side of the church on the end, and a space in between those two doors, perhaps 2 feet wide and 3 feet long, and a marble slab in this space with the name of the church in large letters and the time it was built. Now, all of this I saw with my eyes closed, some 14 miles from the place, and there is where the trail led me. I was then hungry for the first time during the 9 days and nights, so I got up and found that I was very weak and quite exhausted. I had to rub myself some time in a sitting position before I could stand on my feet or get the use of my faculties. But I succeeded in getting down to the house where I had been staying. They did not know where I had been, and I said, "Sister, is there such a church?" Giving her a full description I had seen on my face. "Why, yes, that is our charge here, a nice large church, and a strong congregation." "Why, have you been over there?" "Well, yes, I saw it." "Well," she said, "I was wondering where you were." My grip was there. "Yes, we often go over there, as it is about 14 miles in good roads. There are some fine people over there, but—" And then she stopped, bit her lips, and changed the conversation. Well, I knew what was on her mind. She asked, "When were you over there?" I said, "I just came from there." Well, that puzzled her. It was only about 6 a.m. So I told her what the elder and the official board said, and that I had trailed the thing to that church. Well, I saw at once that that was a blow, and that she had had a spark of confidence in me. It was all knocked out then and there, as what I told her was the height of folly. Now I want to go back to that hollow log where I saw, in addition to the church, a path from the back of the church going down a slope to a fence where there was a grove, in the midst of some grove a large spring. I saw all this behind that log and told her of it. "Yes," she said, "that is all there." I had never been nearer than 14 miles of that church. Then I told her of that wonderful sermon the elder preacher preached against the saloon, and how it ought to be exposed as all degeneracy was started in the saloon. She looked at me sternly and said, "Well, Brother Bevington, do you really believe that all this disgrace was wrought through that church?" No one had ever been able to glean any information relative to where or by whom it was done. "Yes, ma'am, it was through a box social, as the Lord has shown me." "Oh, I can't believe it." "Well, I can't help that." "Well, what is to be done about it?" "They will never give consent to such a report as that, going out against the grand old church. You will have to let it drop. Say no more about it, and you had better get out of here before it gets noised around." I said, "No, I can't let it drop, as the four cautioned me to stick to the trail." "Well," she said, "the pastor from that church is down here 5 miles visiting a member who recently moved from near this church. Do you think it best to see him before you go away? If so, I will have the boy go after him in our buggy." "Yes, I wish you would." So off he went. Here soon comes the pastor, and he got there about 3 p.m. He threw up his hands in horror at the report, shook his head defiantly, and said, "I will not accept that at all." "Well, sir, you have to accept it whether you want to or not." He rose and said, "Mister," he did not address me as brother, but said sarcastically, "Mister, you have seen this church, or have gotten all this from someone, and now you want to bring this awful calamity within its pure, unstained portals. Sir, you shall not do any such thing, and more than that, sir, I want you to get out of here, and if you haven't money, I will take you to the train and loan you money until you see fit to pay it, and if you never do, it will be all right." I said, "Do you remember what you and the other 3 said? That you would all stand by me, and that I should stick to the trail. Do you remember that?" So off he went, drove 45 miles for the elder. Going to have that crank put where he won't be bringing such disgraces to the churches. Why, they had me branded as a genuine church splitter. So next day, here they all come, pastor, elder, official board, all denouncing me except the elder. He didn't seem to have too much to say, and I felt that he was thinking it possible, though maybe hardly probable. They gave me 24 hours to get out of that country. Well, I had gotten accustomed to threats of rotten eggs, clubs, tar and feather, the rail, dungeons, insane asylums, pits and jails, and even the whipping post. So I was not badly frightened, and made no move towards packing up and getting, as they had ordered. They said, "Aren't you going to get ready to leave?" I said, "I will not be too hasty about this. I will have to wait on the Lord to get orders." The pastor rose and said, "Here are your orders." I said, "I will have to wait on the Lord, and when he says go, I will go, and not before." The three said, "It will never do to have such reports go out relative to this grand old landmark." Well, for the first time the elder spoke up and said, "Well, Brother Bevington, it may be possible that this is all true. And suppose that we admit that it is true. Would it not be better to drop it, and we will pay your way to the next place?" "Well," I said, "you told me to stick to the trail, and if I should do as you say, then the question would arise, with me at least, what did you do? Did you stick to the trail? It would be necessary my telling a lie, by saying that I lost the trail." I said, "It was done there in that grove, at one of your box socials." I said to the elder, "Do you remember that sermon you preached against the saloons?" "Yes." "Well, there you said that every crime that was started in the saloon ought to be published, and the saloon keepers made to face it, expose the saloon keepers as the cause." "Now," I said, "when a girl loses her virtue in and through a church, is the crime or disgrace lessened any, just because it was done through the church?" Well, he had to admit that the crime stood as horrible in one case as another, but said, "It must not be exposed here." I said, "If a girl is ruined in and through a saloon, then go for the saloon keeper hot and heavy. But if the same act is committed by and through the church, then it must be crushed." I said, "O consistency, thou art a jewel," and continued, "I cannot keep still on this matter. 'Tis now reported that I lay up in the woods 9 days in this matter. Well, they say, you can't prove it, as she will not allow anyone to see her." Well, I just left them and went to the woods and got into my formal accommodation quarters and said, "Now, Lord, thou hast permitted me to go this far, and now here I am to get permission to see that girl and get the whole truth from her." That was quite a large proposition, as she would not allow anyone to see her. Well, it took me just 72 hours to get the buzzards off and get still, by getting them entirely out of the way. The troublesome buzzards were not confined only to the prophetic days, but seemed to have quite a numerous following these days, swooping down upon us and devouring the offerings of revelations. After fighting 72 hours and keeping all hell off, I got still and saw myself approaching a house from the back, going down a hill, crossing a creek, going up a bank to a golden fence. Then I climbed over the fence and went through the garden, through a gate, and then up to the back porch. I knocked at the door, and when the door opened, there was the mother of the baby, and she invited me in. Now this was all seen as I lay on my face up in the woods. So I got up and ran right into the path that led me through all this that I have here described. I then came to the brow of the hill, saw the home and the path to the creek, and thence to the garden. I just stopped, got behind a tree, and there poured out my heart in gratitude to my blessed leader. I praised him that he had granted me the privilege of outwitting all men's efforts. I then counted it all done and went just as stated, and the mother of the babe opened the door, invited me in, and gave me a chair there in the kitchen. Well, seeing I was a stranger, she was quite embarrassed and called her mother. The mother came in and was surprised to see me there with her daughter, but she gave me a hearty shake of the hand. They both broke in tears and wept perhaps 30 minutes. Nothing but the deep sobs could be heard. Not a word was uttered. I wept too, as I could read between the sobs what it meant to their precious hearts. While we were there, wrapped in silence, getting down to where the real life was, the father came in. He took to the whole situation at once and threw his arms round his daughter, and there was another pathetic scene. Soon he released his hold and clasped my hand. His tears were flowing, and the frame was trembling until his whole body was under its influence. We wept as if our hearts would break. I felt that I was never under such a holy, pure influence as pervaded that kitchen. It seemed that the great weight which had been crushing them was being applied to me. I don't remember of ever having such intense heart throbs of sorrow as then. We all cried and cried, and it seemed that we could not quit. I wanted to go to the barn, but seemed to be held by an unseen power. O reader, the blessed Holy Ghost was there, in the midst of that shame. Oh, it was so beautiful. I felt that underneath were his everlasting arms, so real were those arms beneath all four of us that I just burst out between the sobs. Oh, dear beloved, God is here. His arms are beneath us. At that the father released his hold of my hand, reeled back, and fell into his dear wife's arms, and they both fell on the sofa and gave vent to a heartburst that I will never forget. Oh, reader, I can scarcely type these lines, as tears flow freely as I go over that scene. But I had to break the long silence. I still cried. Dear beloved, his arms are beneath us now. Yes, now. Oh, we are emerging from this awful darkness that has hung like a death pall these 17 months. I began to praise God, and the mother of the girl rose and clasped my hand, weeping for joy as she waved her right hand above her gray hairs. Oh, I never saw gray hairs that looked so beautiful. As she stood before me, face radiant with the glow of heaven, she said, I know that thou art a man of God. You are the only one that has been in this home for 17 months. The father said, all sit down. So we did. The mother of the babe rose, oh, so beautiful, not in outward appearance, as she was not possessed with what the world calls a beautiful face, but I was getting glimpses of her inner being, and there, so meek and lovely, she told the whole thing from beginning to end. At the time of this box social, the father was very busy in the wheat field, and could not go. Neither could the mother. But 7 of the next girls came and importuned strongly for them to let the girl go. They said, we will go together and remain together, come home together. We have changed to treat ourselves. So the father and mother consented, and the girls went. But as soft drinks and cakes with a ring in them were gambled off, excitement rose pretty high, and the girls were put up at 20 cents, a vote for the prettiest girl, and so on, until they all got coupled off and parted, this girl with the rest. Well, after they had been eating and so on, her company suggested they take a stroll down to the spring and get a drink. She did not like that very well, but finally consented, as he said they would return in a few minutes. As they came to the spring, the young man said, now there hasn't been any school here for some time, and the water may not be just right. As I am passing here daily, I like to get a drink, but the doctor told me that I should use a preventative. So he gave me a powder to purify the water, so we will use it now. He gave her the first drink, and she said that was the last she knew, until the next morning when she woke up in her own bed. She thought it very kind in him to be prepared against impure water. All the time she was telling this, she was in tears and had her head bowed. Finally she looked up and said, I wonder how this all came about. I never could allow myself to see even my dearest friends. Oh, she said as she placed her hands over her ears, is this a dream? What have I done? She seemed bewildered, but continued, I have told you all that I have ever lisped, even to my dear parents who stood so nobly by me in my fall. And at that she fell into her mother's arms. O reader, such a scene. I wish I were able to picture it. She said, oh, this is a mystery. The father rose and clasped her in his arms and said, daughter, this is no mystery. God has answered your mother's and my prayers by sending this man of God here to get at this. Then they asked me how it was that I had come. So I told them all that had been told me, and how I had been in the woods 9 days, and then again about 73 or 74 hours, and how I had seen the path and followed it to the kitchen. Well, now how long do you think all this took? It took over 11 hours before we were through in that kitchen, and then it was nearly 12 midnight. So I was shown a good bed, and I tell you I appreciated it too, as I had spent about 303 hours without my bed or anything to eat, and the next morning enjoyed some good country ham for breakfast. They all marveled at the greatness and accuracy of God. So ever since then, more than ever, I have fought box socials, have suffered many a times by the stand I took, but have lived through all, and am as bold against them now as ever. I remember one time I had to walk 62 miles and carry a heavy grip just because of the stand I took against box socials. I will say to our holiness preachers, take your stand emphatically against them. Cry aloud, spare not. Lift up the voice against them. Thunder it, wherever you go. Let us raise up as one, pierce the serpent in its very center, until we have driven it from our midst. Well, the family soon sold out and went to northern Michigan, to the pine lumber belt. I saw the girl once at the Cincinnati camp, and she still had a good experience. I was once holding a meeting in Kentucky. I was invited to a home for the night, and about 2 o'clock I heard a terrible racket downstairs. I arose, went to the head of the stairs to ascertain what was going on. Why, Brother Bevington, Lucy is dying with terrible cramps. Though I was a stranger to all of them, as that was my first night there, yet I went down and found Grandma rushing in and out to the smokehouse. Everyone in the house was up doing all they could to save the child's life. There she was, writhing in pain. 3 were trying to hold her, while 2 were trying to keep the hot cloth and contents of Grandma's smokehouse on her. The mother stopped long enough to wring her hands in agony, saying, Brother Bevington, what can we do more than is being done? Husband is out in the woods after the horses to go for the doctor. Well, I said, Sister, if you all let her go and take all of those remedies off her, it may be that Jesus will heal her. Oh, Brother Bevington, she could not live 5 minutes without these applications. So as they were doing their best, Grandma stopped and said, Mister, did you ever see anyone healed? I said, Plenty of them. Well, she said, I have heard of such likes, but never saw one. No one never round here has done that way. And she looked so earnestly at me as though she had done her best, and the child was suffering unbearable pains. Well, I said, if you will strip her of those remedies and let go of her, you all will see the power of God. They all feared to venture it on my suggestion, and wanted me to help hold her down, which I declined to do. The mother said, Why, Brother Bevington, if we take our hands off her, she will plunge out of bed and kill herself, and we will be charged with murder. Well, I said, just do as you see fit. I left the room, but Grandma followed me upstairs and said, Don't leave us. Oh, she said, I would love to see Jesus heal her. And are you sure he will if we let her go? Well, I saw that they were so blind to the power of Jesus that I ventured further than I generally do, and said, Yes, Grandma, he will, but can't get at her now, as there isn't room for him in that room. So Grandma went into the room and led me in and said, This man says that Jesus will heal her if we will all get out of the way and take all the rags and poultices off. So that the mother let go of the child, wrung her hands, and said, Oh, I can't assume all this responsibility. Oh, it is too much for me. And all this while there were 4 trying to hold the child down. I raised my hand, and the child dropped down with eyes closed. The mother said, She is dead. I said, She is not dead, but she is quiet. I said, Now, remove all those remedies. Grandma went at it and had a pile on the floor as large as a half a bushel. I then asked all doubters to leave the room. None left. I said, Do you all believe that Jesus will heal this child? One spoke up and said, Well, we none of us can say we do, but we will not be in your way at the least. We all would love to see Jesus manifest his healing power on this suffering child. So I took the oil, anointed her, prayed the prayer of faith, and in 20 minutes she was asleep. I went back to bed, and when the doctor reached there, he found her asleep and said there was nothing the matter with her. He did not leave any medicines, as he had been in the habit of doing. When the father came in, he rushed up to her, laid his hand on her, and said, She is dead, doctor. The doctor laughed. He had never seen anyone healed. It was new to him. The father had quite a time to believe that the child was healed. If it had been more gradual, he probably would have more readily received it. The doctor went home, and then they all went to bed but the father. He had not struggled as the others had, so he remained up to call them all in a few minutes, as he would have it that she could not be healed. I went upstairs, walked the floor, bathed in tears of joy and praise for what Jesus had done. I was called down to breakfast. I had pleaded that the child would get up on its own accord and go out to breakfast and eat a hearty meal. So when I entered the kitchen, there sat the child as well as ever. She jumped up and threw her arms around me and just hugged me good and laughed and cried. I told her that she ought to hug Jesus, as he was the one that healed her. Well, she said, I know he is, but you are the only one that has ever been around here with the faith that you have for healing. After breakfast, Grandma said, Brother Bevington, come here. She took me out to the smokehouse. Such a sight, rafters loaded down with all sorts of remedies. Poor Grandma toiled days and weeks in the fall, getting those great displays of roots, herbs, leaves, barks, all for the keeping up of worn out or disabled bodies. She said goodbye, and she looked up and said, Now, Jesus, if you can heal Lucy, you can and will heal all the rest of us, she said. Brother Bevington, I want you to get them all down, for I will make a bonfire of them. I said, Grandma, are you sure you can trust Jesus, as I won't be around here long? She said, Yes, sir, I have seen what I have never seen before, and I will believe and trust Jesus. I said, Then you really want me to get these down? Yes, sir. Well, hadn't you better see your son, the father of Lucy? Well, you can see him if you want to, but I assure you that he will not object. So I went out to the barn and said, Your mother wants me to haul down that drugstore and the smokehouse and make a bonfire of them. What do you think about it? So he went up to the house to see if Lucy was still up, and he found her out in the swing just laughing, and he said, Oh, Papa, I never felt as I now feel. I know that Jesus healed me. So we went back to the barn, and he told me to do as Grandma said. So we had the pleasure of stripping those rafters and boxes and hooks of that great store, and Lucy, with a radiant face, lighted the fire. We all had the blessed time at the bonfire. I have seen them several times, but they say Grandma never gathered up any more remedies. Lucy was sound and well and went to school, which she had never been able to do. Oh, hallelujah to our great physician. Amen. I was holding a meeting once, back in Willard, Kentucky, the former home of the famous Fleming boys. Their mother is still living there. I was invited home by the Eisen family, strangers to me. We were in a jolt wagon, and the wife carried a large lamp so as to see the best road, as the roads were bad. The wife jumps out of the wagon with the baby. The lamp was handed her, chimney hot, and the baby got its little hand against the chimney and burned it badly. We put the mules out and went in. The little thing was screaming terribly, and the mother was walking the floor in great agony. The girls were trying to do something, but all to no avail. I said, Sister, though I did not know how they would take it, did you people ever take cases like this to Jesus? The mother was crying like her heart would break as the child was screaming, but she said, Do you believe that Jesus can heal the baby? I said, Yes. Well, she just handed me the baby and sat down as calm as though nothing was wrong. I laid my hand on the burned hand, and in 6 minutes the child was asleep. To Jesus be all the glory. I well remember how near I came to getting tripped up by Satan's schemes, as when I first thought of mentioning healing to the mother. It was suggested that I had better go a little slow, as these were strangers to me. They would not take kindly to my suggestion. I did hesitate for a moment, but soon rallied from that position. As none of them were converted at that time, 'tis suggested that if I wanted to get a hold of them, I had better go slow, as they had not take any stock in holiness and all that stuff. Satan took the pains to tell me that they were not saved, but I ran the chances and in a few moments found out that they were both saved and were hungering for sanctification. So you see, Satan used a stratagem. The baby slept well all night. Next morning, all the skin was peeled off the back of its hand, but the baby never cried any more. Praise God for such victories. The parents both got sanctified before I left. Also, 2 of their daughters got saved. Now, we all know that cause and effect are inseparable. Where there is an effect, we know that the cause is round somewhere. And one of the main causes for not allowing Jesus to heal us is the lack of entire sanctification. For when we fully die out, then we are so dead to this world and all its environments that we can trust God to do most anything. For instance, I held a meeting in Ohio. Trudged along, had a slow, hard fight, and so far as I could see, just one family was brought in, but the heads were regenerated and sanctified. I went from there some 22 miles for another meeting, somewhat discouraged as to the results of the meeting just closed. As several had said, it was about as near a failure as they ever had been. Well, I went as best I could at number 2. The second night, several fell at the altar. Well, round from the start, it looked as though a great revival was just ahead of us. But after the first Sunday, we began looking for seekers for the Holy Ghost. I preached the second work strong and incessant, but no one came. The seekers for regeneration were plenty. Well, I began weeping over the state, pleading with them, but there was not a seeker for the second work. The meeting closed in what seemed to the people a blaze of glory. Some 50 people had claimed to have prayed through. Well, we considered this meeting to be more of a failure than the other. In spite of all my preaching on the sensuality of sanctification and my fasting for them, not one saw it. Well, I went away from there feeling pretty bad, and Saturday night put forth an extra effort, gave one of my best Bible readings on the second work of grace, but no one made any move. I said, Brethren, generation is a most blessed and glorious work, but it does not complete God's ideal of a child of His. I said, if you fail to go on into the second work, He will never stand. The closing sermon was a strong Bible reading on the second work. No one came. Well, this meeting was quite far-reaching in its sphere. Many came for miles, so it was considered a great meeting. Several asked the reason for the failure of the meeting over on the creek. Well, I said nothing, but felt that this was the greater failure of the two. I packed up my tent, went 45 miles from there, and kept going on, and have been going on ever since. Hallelujah. But now back to the failure. I went to the Cincinnati camp about 9 months after this first meeting, and a brother said, Brother Bevington, I have a call to hold a meeting back on Noose Creek. I was told that you held a meeting there, and it was a failure. How about it? Well, I said, I do not call it a failure by any means, as the heads of the family got saved and sanctified. Was that all? Yes, as far as I could see. And we heard you held a rousing meeting over at the Bend. Well, I said, that is what they called it, but I said no more. He took his tent and turned the failure down. He went over on the Bend where the rousing meeting was, pitched his tent and cut loose, expecting a rousing meeting. Preaches 8 days and not a soul at the altar. Well, he was somewhat discouraged, but sticks to it until Sunday night. But no one came. But Sunday, his last day, the man and wife from over at the pronounced failure that were sanctified called him to bring his tent over to their neighborhood. The evangelist, not knowing that this was the place where I had the terrible failure, gladly accepted the call, glad to get most anywhere away from that place. The brother came after him Monday with the team. He begins his meeting Tuesday night, cuts loose on the second work, which they would not stand for over on the Bend. So he feels impressed to call the altar, and 8 fell at the altar for sanctification. This brother and wife had been holding cottage meetings during the lapse of time, and 11 had been regenerated, and 3 of them sanctified. So we need power, and faith is power, and it's hard to exercise the faith with the old man in us. Healing helps us in various ways. I was holding a meeting in Indiana, and there were 2 sisters, unmarried, lovely girls, good singers, good leaders and workers, beautiful characters. Hence, they had a good influence over those whom they met. The first service was Sunday morning. They were there and at their post. I saw that they were going to be a great help. Sunday night they did not come, and Monday night they did not come. So I went over to see about it. Well, they said, Brother Bevington, we are here with Mother, and we make our living on milk and butter, and the cows do not get up here in time for us to get to the meeting, and we actually haven't the time to hunt them up, as they have a large range to run in. I said, what time would it be necessary for the cows to be here in order that you could get to the church? Well, they would have to be here much earlier than they come, so we just can't come. I said, now isn't that what I asked you? please answer my question. Well, Brother Bevington, I know, but they never come. There it is again. Now please answer my question. What time would they have to be there? Oh, well, there is no use talking about that, as they never come. There it is again. Now please answer my question. Oh, well, they would have to be here by 5 p.m. All right, that is what I wanted to know. Now, have they a bell? Yes, a large one. Well, you listen for that bell at 4:45 p.m. I went to my room, got down on my face, and said, Now, you know, Lord, we need these girls there, as they will save my voice and add much to the good results of the meeting. So now, please have that bell in the hearing distance at 4:45. I kept digging and holding on. It was about 2 o'clock when I went on my face. At 4:30, one of the girls said laughingly, Well, our time is nearly up. The other said, Oh, do you think those cows will be here at 4:45 or be in hearing? Well, he told us to listen. There won't be any harm in listening, and I'm going out and open the gate. So after she had opened the gate, she looked towards the woods, and lo, to her surprise, the bell was heard, and she called to the sister. Out she came and said, Well, well, they are coming sure. I looked at the clock. It was just 4:45 exactly. They both came to the church early and told this experience, and it was a great boon to the meeting. Those cows came up at 4:45 every night during the meeting, and did more effective preaching than Bevington did, as it was noised all around, and many came to see that fellow who could bring those cows up there at that unreasonable hour. I never had tried that before, and never have since. But if God should tell me as he did then, I should do so. Now I have more marvels of God's dealings. Some I have never told from the pulpit, that is, these major ones, though I have told them privately or to groups, and I suppose that those who have heard this one would consider the book incomplete without this, my straw stack experience. This one will complete the major experiences. I was holding a meeting in Indiana. The weather was very cold, about 30 below zero, and there was plenty of snow. People came for miles in the old-fashioned sleds, with 2 horses, and bells could be heard for miles. Some came as far as 35 miles. A good sledding rendered it easy on the horses that were not worked much at that time of the year. Many came to see the sights, and many of those who came from a distance got sanctified. Well, several had gotten down and actually been saved. 4 of those whom came from a distance got sanctified. Well, as the meeting progressed, these 4 said several times that I must come over into their neighborhood, to which I paid no attention, as my hands were full there. But they kept urging me until finally I said, Well, where do you live? How far from here? About 25 miles. We have a church over there, M.E., and you must come over. So, as the time came to close this meeting, I said, Well, have you the permission of your pastor for me to hold a meeting in said church? Oh, that is all right, as the church is on Father's place. He built it. Well, I said, it belongs to the M.E. conference, and you would have to get permission. So I went up to my room and got on my face. I lay there for 26 hours, and then felt led to go over. Next morning, here came 3 of their leaders after me, but no call from their pastor. I sent them back, and he came over next day and said, I understand that some of our people have been attending your meeting over here, and that they want you to come over there with us. I understand that you preach holiness. Yes, as hot as I can. He said, You are all John Wesley Methodists. Well, I said, I have been running into them of late. I don't find many John Wesley Methodists. He said, Do you preach holiness to sinners? I said, I preach just as God gives me the message. Some places it is on holiness as a second work of grace, and that at others holiness is seldom mentioned. Well, we would be very glad to have you come over, as it would please some of our people, but we consider it very unwise to preach holiness to sinners. We would suggest that you preach regeneration to the sinners, as that is what they need. And then, if you wanted to, we could have some afternoon for holiness. I said, is this merely a suggestion, or is it to take the form of a command or desire? He said, I think it is the only way we could permit you to come over. Well, I said, I can't come over on those terms at all. How would it do to have one night in the week for holiness? I said I could not agree at that, as it might be all holiness as a second work. And I said I could not come over unless I was to have complete charge and control, preach as long as God said so, and just as He prescribed. I could not have any restrictions whatever. I might be led to call on you to pray, and I might not. Well, he said, isn't that bordering on fanaticism? You can term it whatever you wish. That is where I would have to stand should I come over. So he went back and said, Brethren, we can't have that fellow over here. Well, he is a genuine crank. He isn't going to let me have anything to do with that meeting, not even to pray, and may not allow me to be on my own platform. Oh no, we can't have him here. Well, these four said, if we can't have him in the church, we will fix up a tobacco stripping house, seat it, and put stoves in it. It will hold about as many as the church. We feel that man ought to come here, as souls prayed through every night over there, and you have been here 3 years, and not a soul has been regenerated. Well, the pastor saw that this would never do, so he gave in and sent for me. I went over and preached fire on his 300 members. The pastor had said that I ought not to preach holiness to sinners. I said that this doctrine of freedom from sin seems to please the sinner pretty well. He said that they had 350 members, and all were saved, of course. Well, I thought that the four who had been over and gotten salvation and then were sanctified were a pretty safe sample of the whole 350. After the third sermon, the pastor said that the Ladies' Aid were planning for quite an extensive program for Christmas, and that they could not locate a place for their work only at the church. He also said that they were quite sorry, as they would dearly love to have the meeting go on, but to please the Ladies' Aid, we would have to close it. Well, though I had papers signed by him that permitted me to remain in the church, yet I could not. Being permitted to preach the fourth night, I announced the action of the pastor and the aides. A man jumped up and said, we will go over to the schoolhouse. We, however, put it to a vote as to whether we should go into the schoolhouse, and it was said that every hand went up, except that of the pastor and his wife. Even his son and daughter raised their hands, so we went over there the next night. The next day, this pastor hired 5 boys to cut up the seats, so as to stop the meetings. He gave them $2 apiece, and they went at it in good shape. The board came in and said, the boys are cutting up the seats badly. So we were requested to stop the meeting there. But the people had gotten another place. That night, when I went to my lodging place, I found my grips out by the gate and the house darkened. I took that for a pretty good hint, and picked up my grips and started out, like Abraham, not knowing where to go. I could have gone, I suppose, to any of those 4 families, but did not know where they lived, and God did not want me to go there, as He had a better place for me. By my staying where I did, He got more glory than if I had found any of these.